All right, we're back for another show. And today I've got Steve Govett. He is the president of the San Diego Seals lacrosse team. Probably one of the coolest logos in sports. I love it. I loved watching you guys do your kind of like teasers going into it a few years ago. So thanks for joining me, Steve. I appreciate it.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Andrew, and excited to talk a little shop.
Yeah, well, I'm excited because I haven't had anyone on talking lacrosse yet. And, you know, I've been to some indoor lacrosse games. I've seen outdoor lacrosse. You know, I looked at it as a potential business years ago. And I think it's a lot of fun. So I'm kind of curious to learn more about that side of it. But what I always like to do is I like my guests to kind of just walk through your resume, you know, walk through, you know, the stops that you've had, some of the things that you've worked on, and then I'll kind of chime in from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, started a typical path, I guess, to the front office, which was through, you know, there's some interesting paths in sports. One, you know, probably a lot through ticket sales, starts in ticket sales and moves through to a number of different opportunities or starts in grassroots marketing or whatever the case may be. I started as a player and grew up in just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia, and left there in 1989, went to a small college in Virginia, played lacrosse there for 4 years and met my wife and decided I was going to stay in the U.S. And then ultimately went on to play for the Philadelphia Wings, which is a flagship franchise in the National Lacrosse League. Back then, it was the major indoor lacrosse league, and you know, there was a long history. Currently, I mean, a long history, 35 years of continuous competition in the National Lacrosse League. The name changed in the summer of 1997, but I played in the league for a number of years. I had the great pleasure to win championships and play with a great group of guys in Philadelphia, and then moved on to the front office. I was asked by then GM Mike French of the Philadelphia Wings to move in because, interestingly enough, in lacrosse at the time, everybody was part-time and everybody had another job, and I was in the golf business and managing golf courses. And so, interestingly enough, he made the assessment that because I was in management of golf courses, that I was a general manager, and my title was general manager, that I was in sports marketing, I was in sports, I was a general manager, that I should be the general manager of the Wings. And so made me the general manager of the Wings. I made $18,000 a year at the time. I kept
that good title. You had the good title.
I had the great title, but I kept my golf job. Okay. And was managing golf courses, you know, year round. And for those people that are not familiar with the golf business, which is, you know, interesting from the perspective of operations, you work your tail off in the summertime, and then you lay everybody off in the wintertime. So you work your tail off in the wintertime as well, because you're the only one there with a couple of other staff members, and all the people that were doing all the real work during the summer months have left and gone back to college or school or whatever the case may be, and you're left there kind of working the shop and doing all this stuff. So I took on this role thinking that I was going to work in the off season in the summer in golf, and then I was going to go work in lacrosse in the winter, and both jobs ended up being full-time year round. So I was getting to the point where 60 and 80-hour weeks were normal, and loved what I was doing in both, but certainly my passion was in lacrosse. And so as I moved on in the opportunity, I got a chance to go work for the Washington Power, which was a new team that we launched in Washington, D.C., which is a massive disaster in the 2 years that we were there. But probably learned more in those 2 years than I learned throughout my career since then. And then had the great fortune at that particular point in time to move to Denver and work as we moved the Washington Power to Denver under the ownership of Stan Kroenke, and forged a career there for 15 years with Kroenke Sports and Entertainment in Denver, and created a phenomenon there with a lot of really good people with Kroenke Sports and in the market in Denver, and watched the National Lacrosse League grow and excel and sell a ton of tickets and entertain a ton of people, not only in Denver but around North America. And then ultimately moved to San Diego to take on the launch of the San Diego Seals with Joe Tsai and help grow Joe Tsai Sports and the platform that we have for him to extend his passion into both basketball and lacrosse. And it's been all these opportunities have been fantastic, but certainly working for Kroenke Sports has been a highlight, and then moving on to work for Joe Tsai has been pretty tremendous. So excited.
That's some great ownership groups there. So,
well, I joke in the league that I'm 2-0 with billionaires in the National Lacrosse League. So I'm excited by that, and certainly carry a lot of regard and fond memories of my time in Denver with KSE, but the future and the horizon is significantly bright and exciting with JTS. So excited by that.
Yeah, no, it's good. And I didn't realize you were in Philly too. So I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, probably almost right in between DC and Philly as far as distance wise. Not, you wouldn't go that way, but so I remember the Wings down there playing at the Spectrum back then, I think.
We did. We played at the Spectrum and filled the place up with 16,000 people.
It's crazy atmospheres.
It was exciting. We were one of the first events after the Flyers and the Sixers to play in the, I forget the name of the building, Wells Fargo Center.
First Union it started with.
First Union, and yeah,
Wachovia,
so we
it changed.
Wachovia, the PNC, there was all sorts of names, but at the end of the day, enjoyed playing, but in both the Spectrum. I mean, look, the National Lacrosse League, long history playing in kind of some of the iconic old barns of Maple Leaf Gardens and the Buffalo Auditorium and the Boston Garden and the Nassau Coliseum, and places where a massive amount of memories have been made for a lot of fans. And we've played in all those old barns and watched the growth and opening of new barns and these great buildings now that are just a massive and a ton of fun to play in. But playing in Calgary and places now that are filling the building in Calgary, Saskatchewan, and the phenomenon that has happened in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and who would have thought? But Toronto, who played in full barns, in Vancouver, and now trying to replicate that in San Diego and grow in a non-traditional market for the National Lacrosse League, is challenging. It's a ton of fun. It's certainly a labor of love and something that I can't speak enough about.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I look back. I'm 41, about to be 42. So in high school in Pennsylvania, we didn't have lacrosse in our school, but I do know the region. It was big, Baltimore. My wife's from Baltimore, that Baltimore, DC area on all the way up, through Philly. But I look now and it's like, and just about every school you start to see it, more and more. It's such a cool game. So I'm kind of excited to see that grow. But how has that been, from the start of your career, even when you were playing until like now? I mean, it's still, probably not, to the point where you guys want it to be as far as recognition, but it's grown so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think over the course of the last, and again, my career spans, from when I first entered the league as a player in the fall of 1993 and approaching a 30-year career in the National Lacrosse League, I have watched the game grow from a Northeast-based sport. And again, indoor lacrosse, or box lacrosse as we call it, skews somewhat towards a more blue-collar demographic. And I think that has a lot to do with the opportunity to attend games for a price level that is less than an NBA or an NHL experience. And so having the opportunity to buy 8 home games or 9 home games, in our case, is an experience where people have fallen in love with the excitement and the attraction of a circus, if you will, and a phenomenal product on the floor in a game that if you go, you'll fall in love with it, but also the music and and the dance teams and the promotions and all the stuff that I think we've done really well in our league, not to mention the fact that our players are super accessible and very approachable, which is always a positive. And they're good guys, they're good people, and the storylines and the narrative about our league have been fantastic. But watching it, I think my first, I shouldn't say this because I grew up in the West, and it was a hotbed. I think the game has gone from hotbed popular to expanding beyond that, where kids are starting to play the game at a really young age. And I hear this a lot. It's because maybe dad didn't play, and so they can experience the game without being coached from the sidelines.
That's a great point.
Yeah, like they might be in baseball, or it's a slight rebellion. Again, football, baseball, basketball. Everybody played those sports, so their kids are kind of attaching themselves to lacrosse because it's high paced and fast action, and it's a lot of opportunity for them to engage in the sport and have the ball and get touches and get reps and experiences, because ultimately, in baseball, you're falling asleep in the outfield. If you get stuck out there's only 9 positions. You don't move a whole lot. Soccer, you may not touch the ball. A lot of running around. Basketball, again, if you're not the best player on the team or the tallest, maybe you get left behind. I mean, I think if football, you're not the biggest. So lacrosse has a great equalizer, and that's the stick. And I think kids and both boys and girls at a young age are finding an infatuation with the stick itself, and kind of the maturations that everybody goes through with regards to stringing a stick and falling in love with the stick and sleeping with the stick and all that fun stuff that you do when you're a kid. But as you grow, it sticks with you. And I think it's a participatory sport that ultimately adults continue to play, long after, they lose interest in football and basketball and baseball. Softball is still a big one, but I think lacrosse continues to be a participatory sport. But where we saw it grow the most was when Denver became kind of that hotbed in the West, and we moved kind of west of the Mississippi for the first time in the NLL. And here we are, kind of 17, 18 years later, and they're still drawing crowds of 12 to 15,000 a game. And the opportunities exist where new ownerships are interested and excited. Just announced a team in Fort Worth, Texas, and, in the Dallas region, that's a groundbreaking opportunity for us. And I think as we move west and south, you're going to continue to see the growth. And there's a bit of a skip in the hinterland of, the Midwest of Illinois and Indiana and basketball country and football country and Missouri and Western Pennsylvania, if you will. But I think what you're seeing is a national consciousness start to begin to understand that lacrosse is a sport, whereas maybe 20 years ago, they thought it was a flycatcher on the end of a stick.
Well, I think, just, on an indoor lacrosse perspective, I enjoy it because it is that fast pace. It seems physical, but it's kind of like, you have the guys. I don't know. I believe that the guys are like kind of like free subs, like hockey, right?
Yeah. No.
So I mean,
you can sub.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just different, and I kind of like those indoor sports. Indoor soccer, same thing. Looking at outdoor soccer is not as appealing to me personally. Indoor soccer, it's physical, it's fast. Same thing with arena football, but lacrosse is just I never got a chance to play it, so it's really got me intrigued. And I do think a great area for a team would be in St. Louis. I spent years in St. Louis. There's several facilities there, but the amount of youth lacrosse in that area is just growing so rapidly. But so tell your people, let's get a team in St. Louis at some point.
We're in that situation where, it's not necessarily participation doesn't equal consumerism. And if you look at any of the sports, football, basketball, baseball, I mean, every kid played baseball as a kid, right? There was some touch point. But if you look at football and the passion that people have for football and the NFL and college football for that matter, a number of them, most of them, never played the sport, but they engage in the sport because they love the spectator, process. Fantasy football obviously has made that popular over time, but we don't necessarily think that you have to have played the game to enjoy the sport. And in fact, your consumerism of our sport can be dictated just by the love of the competition and the show and the experience and kind of that ethereal, kind of visceral connection to walking into the building and seeing this game played physically and in the building. And obviously we need to figure out how to transfer that to a media platform so that ultimately you can enjoy the sport, not just in the building, but enjoying that experience, watching it so that you understand the nuances of the game. And you talked about indoor soccer, you talked about indoor football. The National Lacrosse League is the highest level of our game, right? It's the highest level of lacrosse. And so you might go to an AHL game, you might go to an indoor soccer, you might go to some of the other opportunities. And they may be entertaining and exciting in smaller markets or other markets, but ultimately we are the highest level of the game. And our guys are, our players and our league is not minor league, even though we carry that moniker of a quote unquote minor league sport potentially. We prefer to call it, a niche sport. But I would like to shake the niche off and ultimately get to a mainstream media with a wider spread distribution opportunity. So, I'll give you some example. The National Lacrosse League sells more tickets in a year than every other form of lacrosse at the youth, high school, college, and professional level. The National Lacrosse League is the pinnacle of the game in selling tickets and averages over 10,000 tickets a game. And only because a couple markets like San Diego may hold us back a little bit. But we have teams that are drawing 15, 16,000 people a game and entertaining a ton of people in those markets. And so we need to translate that into a media platform. Well,
and it's, you guys in some markets are outdrawing NHL teams. I mean, there's some cities that are doing very well.
It happens. It certainly happens, and I think our sport is conducive to a really affordable entertainment opportunity. But and the affordability is key. But I think it comes down to the quality of the product on the floor and the entertainment and the excitement that exists, and high scoring, high packed, high impact opportunities that you're going to get a score in the 12 to 15, 17 range where, I think a lot of people, when they go to a sporting event, they want to jump out of their chair and cheer.
Yeah.
They want to spill their beer and their popcorn because they got so excited and they're high-fiving everybody around them. And ultimately, basketball potentially has gotten to a point where it's mundane to see them score 50 and 60 times. Even though some of those scores are magical and spectacular, it becomes kind of commonplace in a game. Whereas we think that we have a really good mixture of, 15 scores per game where the number of goals and the number of quality plays and opportunities and goaltending and the things that happen in our game, you can cheer and you can get out of your seat. And isn't that what you want to do when you go to a sporting event, is let loose a little bit and forget about what's going on at home and yell and scream and boo and hiss and teach your kid who the good guys are and who the bad guys are and craft that narrative for people that, you can actually let loose for 2 hours.
Yeah, no. And you want to, I think American sports, American fans, they want that excitement. They want that high scoring, fast pace. We're impatient. We want everything now. And, to be able to get that many scores, like you don't want to go to the bathroom because you're afraid you're going to miss, a goal. So, no, I think that's really what makes it so attractive. And then obviously you said it, I mean, the entertainment aspects of it with, having a dance team, music, it's more than just lacrosse. I mean, lacrosse is the you said circus, maybe the middle ring of the circus, and the other stuff is helping to, keep everyone tied in.
We never know where the circus starts and the game begins. And so many people have asked me, you play music during games, you have all this other stuff going on, which is true. But ultimately, our turf allows us to do that in an indoor setting, right, where we're not on ice. A little more like basketball in the NBA, where you see, kind of the crowd engagement, if you will. But I don't know that I want to find out where it is, because ultimately, if you cross too far one way or the other, you might lose people that are there for any number of given reasons, because ultimately, I'm not sure that consumers go to events for one particular reason. And look, I love our game. I played it. I'm a huge fan. I love, the passes and the catches and the hits and the balls going in the net and the goals and the assists. I love all that. But ultimately, that might not be the reason why everybody else goes to the game. And so I almost don't want to I want to find out, but I don't want to find out. So, I just don't want to find out on the downside.
Yeah. You mentioned in Washington, you learned some stuff like just, through a bad experience or just, trials and whatnot. What is kind of the best lessons that you learned during that tough time?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with quality of ownership. And certainly the owner we had in Washington was an amazing, wonderful person, completely undercapitalized and completely out of his element with regards to professional sports ownership. Good person, fantastic. And I think that's probably the downfall of many, many sports leagues in North America and around the world. I mean, ultimately, well-capitalized ownership means having staying power to be able to withstand the ups and the downs of this particular industry. And we're currently right now in this industry in a down, and without, quality ownership and well, capitalized, deep-pocketed ownership that has a passion for our particular sport, whatever sport that happens to be, is important, because you can stay the course. You can establish core objectives, and what I understand to be, the what, the how, and the when. What are we going to, what's our core principles? How are we going to achieve those core principles? And then when are we going to achieve those core principles? And sometimes in an undercapitalized ownership situation, you can't get a grasp on all three. And I think, our situation today and Kroenke Sports and many others, whether they were instant successes or the longer burn that is, the Southern California market, we have to stick to the core principles and then adjust accordingly on the how. How are we going to get there? And then the when can be variable. In some cases, it may be much faster than others. And again, like I said, Denver was faster. In Washington, I felt like a dog chasing his tail quite a lot. You talk about how to fill a building, and we got caught up in the concept of chasing lacrosse consumers. And I've said this before, if the lacrosse consumers, for the most part, know when you're playing, they know you have a team, they know when you're playing, they know when your games are, they know how to get your schedule, they know what your brand is, they're aware.
The average Joe is what you need.
Absolutely. And so if you're chasing your tail, trying to get the lacrosse consumer to come to your games, then you're almost failing out of the box, because those people should be a core consumer that buys your product without enticing. Now, certainly you got to give them a reason, and you got to give them a great product and a good value, right? I'm not suggesting that they're lemmings and they have to come, but if you have
to know you as opposed to the average Joe. I mean, that's
exactly. So if you have to spend time and energy and money to get them there, and yes, you got to give them a reason to be there, but if you have to spend that time, energy, and money on them, then you're not spending it on the non-endemic consumer. And the non-endemic consumer is the harder nut to crack. It's the harder database to access. And ultimately, in this new age, right, because back in the day, we used to just fire out a shotgun shot with our advertising and put, into the ether a number of television ads and radio ads and print ads, and it was easy, right? And now we're laser pointing the structure of database management, and advertising is far more technical. And we just hired recently in the last 6 to 8 months a digital marketer who has experience specifically with our, as a vice president of marketing, specifically with digital marketing and digital advertising, because that's our bread and butter now. And you don't spend money on advertising on television or radio. And it's a little sad because it's a visual that is fun to do and fun to watch, but it's changed so dramatically. But yeah, back in the day, we were chasing endemic consumers that should have been easy, and they were hard, and that ultimately distracts you from other core principles of introducing new people into the ecosystem.
But I think, what you said first is so true. It's being properly capitalized. And I've been on the wrong side of that, as a team owner. And I always say, look, I'm an operator. I've ended up in the spot of being the majority owner several times, but I'm not, and you need that to really be able to do, what you said and be successful. You need that. You need that backing. And, when you like now, fast forward, I mean, you talked about the marketing. I mean, with digital marketing, I mean, you can pinpoint exactly who you want to target, which is great. You can be so much more efficient than, like you mentioned before, TV, radio, everything else. I mean, I still believe in some of those things for certain aspects, but to really move the needle, there's so much you could do digitally that, can target exactly what you want. And it's priced so much better. You're not wasting money on people you don't need to market to.
Yeah, no question. I do think that there is, a potential downside that what slips through the cracks is kind of the random amount of fans that capture you capture their interest with, an ad in a different place. And maybe they're not a, digital consumer. I don't know who that is right now, but ultimately, it's possible. But again, I mean, it goes back to me putting on a great show. And if you put on a great show, the one thing that hasn't changed in this world that's probably been blowtorched in a much different way, right? In the megaphone of social media sharing of your interests, right, is putting into the palm of everyone's hand this blowtorch, if you will, to share the word of mouth. And word of mouth is very important that you can't control. And ultimately, people telling the story of your product is vitally important, whether they're doing it around a water cooler, that's probably not existing right now as everybody is staying at home working. But on the Zoom call, did you see that opportunity last night where, are you going this weekend? That's all going to come back in the world. It might look different. It might look, the same. It might look different depending on how we progress through the next, few months. But ultimately, I think putting on a good product and making sure that you're kind of taking care of the details and you're focused on the little things. And some of the little things are not just about winning and losing, but it's about making sure that your customer service goes beyond just simply, the fact that the beer is cold and the popcorn's hot, right? It's making sure that you're engaging with people and getting onto their level and engaging with fans and telling your story and crafting the narrative for them that ultimately, this is not only is this a great experience, but I'm engaged. I want to be a fan of this sport. I want to be a fanatic of these teams and this sport because ultimately the narrative is crafted intelligently.
So you went from, Kroenke, you were there for, most of your career. What kind of enticed you to leave that situation and go to San Diego where, Denver's probably one of the most successful organizations, and now you're going to start up a brand new one?
Yeah, look, I was in the pinnacle of my career fairly early on, and when I was about 35 years old, started with Kroenke Sports, and it could not have been a more engaging, exciting opportunity to launch in Denver. Denver's a great place, great city, unbelievable sports town, and great opportunity for my family and my kids, and they grew up there, and we loved it. I think the Kroenke Sports ecosystem and environment, as it's massively grown over the course of the last 15 to 20 years, I found that again, at the highest level of lacrosse, it was the flagship franchise in the National Lacrosse League. It was selling out on a regular basis. We were winning games and competitive every year. And I think ultimately I looked around saying, you know what, I can stay here the rest of my life. I really can. And I could retire working for this organization. I love the people there. I love my superiors. I love the ownership. I love the people that I worked with. And ultimately what I think it came down to is the opportunity to recreate that in the National Lacrosse League with another owner who was passionate about launching something new. And I think reinvigorating, look, I could go play golf at 3:00 every afternoon in the summer if I wanted to, because, we were pretty successful, but putting myself in a scenario where I found a new challenge, found a new kind of passion for, in a much different way, and in building something and launching something. And you know what? This franchise not launching the way that the franchise launched in Denver, a little different, a little harder, easier in some respects, but harder in others. And launching a new team and the excitement of new players and coaches and hiring kind of a team of people to put together. And I think what we've done here in San Diego has really created a really well put together executive group with our team. And that was a lot of passion for me, is to try and find a way to build a new team of people. And we're building something from scratch in the context of, when we went to Denver, it was a plug and play opportunity. We plugged into the marketing. We plugged in. If I needed a cell phone, I went to the cell phone department. If I needed a computer, I went to the IT guys. I never worried about any of that type of stuff. Here, we're building that sports, call it conglomerate. We're building that sports entity in a multi-sport platform that is global, right? We're obviously, Joe spends a significant time in Asia and Hong Kong and obviously, Brooklyn and our connections there, but we have some operations in Canada. We have some here in Southern California, and ultimately building that from scratch, but finding the right office space, finding, silly stuff, that accounting, and setting up account, that to me got my juices flowing to the extent that it wasn't a plug and play. We literally started from scratch, and everything we did in launching the team was a different experience than it was in Denver.
Were you on board from like the beginning, or was like the team logo and announcement already done before you joined?
Yeah, no, Joe and I had the early conversations that I would leave Kroenke and go launch JTS and then ultimately launch the Seals within that. So I was myself and Josh Gross, my VP of Business Operations, came from Kroenke Sports, and we launched, the two of us, working out of our cars and on airplanes back and forth from Denver, and a lot of Starbucks tables, and launched this team really from scratch, and the logos, and I appreciate you mentioning our logos. The guys at Adrenaline Branding in Denver helped us with that. They've done a ton of work with the Broncos and the Outlaws and the Mammoth and a number of Kroenke Sports entities. Really, really good people. Dan Price is a good friend, and we'll definitely be using him again as we continue to launch more assets and properties.
Yeah, no, great logo. What were some of those challenges that you kind of ran into as you were launching this team?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we still continue to address challenges. And I think our biggest issue, when we launched in Denver, we had a built-in database of people that were consuming Pepsi Center products, right? Consuming the Avalanche, consuming the Nuggets, consuming Britney Spears, consuming concert experiences. And the database was significant. You know, and so ultimately, even if you weren't a Guns N' Roses fan, we at least had a touch point to market to you from an email perspective or a database perspective. And we had a platform to do it. So as those marketing assets, same marketing person, right, who was plugged into the entire community, right, and all of the sports directors at all those networks and the radio networks and the stations, and the, he was the central buyer for all of those assets in town, that ultimately, when it came time to, activate a smaller budget, he was able to double down, triple down, quadruple down on trade opportunities that he didn't need to use for the Avalanche or Nuggets because they were sold out, right? Or concerts that were selling out quickly. And so he banked a lot of trade and was able to use those assets in the marketplace. Lacrosse obviously was a growing and burgeoning sport in the Denver community. And I think what initially happened very quickly and different than Washington was those lacrosse community people and those endemic consumers embraced the sport, bought season tickets, and gave us a strong base of 3,500 in season tickets right away. And then ultimately, we were able to grow and expand on that because people fell in love with the product. We brought a lot of people into the sport of lacrosse, right? The Mammoth, instead of taking advantage of the people that were in it and selling tickets to them, we actually brought fans to our game, and they ultimately put their kids in lacrosse. So that was a big difference there. But here, I think what we did is start from scratch. And so it's a longer burn. It's a longer process. Certainly San Diego is a market that has been burnt by their sports teams in the past. They don't have an NBA team. They don't have an NHL team. The Chargers had just left. And everybody was like, wow, there's a massive void there. It's going to be easy. I think competing a little bit with certainly they're still watching the NFL on television and still consuming that brand. But you know what? People in Denver were Broncos fans as well, right? And so ultimately finding the right demographic, finding that niche of people that are going to consume our product. And I think the biggest challenge that we've faced is an old and antiquated building, that's 50 plus years old, that while it has 13,000 seats, doesn't have a number of the kind of modern amenities in the building that makes it a cool experience to attend. Right. And so Pepsi Center or any number of other buildings that you go to around town, and, in Saskatoon, you'll go to any building to get out of the minus 40 degree weather. San Diego, you're not doing that because it's not minus 40 degrees. You can go do something else on a Saturday afternoon because it's sun shining. And, but at the end of the day, I think people aren't coming to the building to enjoy a great, premium seat experience or a great technological, visual experience with great Jumbotron and ribbon boards and all those things, or the kind of the modern amenities that any building gives you, the gathering spaces that you have at T-Mobile in Vegas, that you have in a number of other places where you can go and, you can get into the venue. You need a ticket, but you don't get a seat because you want to just gather with your friends and maybe just watch. So we're strapped with kind of an old antiquated building that is out of touch and out of date with kind of modern amenities, and people have been to it, right, for every event in their life for 50 years. So you're not going, hey, let's go to the lacrosse game just because I want to see the building. Right. And so, so we've started kind of, let's call it 50 yards behind in the race. And we have to build up a lot of opportunities in the marketplace, right? Not being a part of the ecosystem of the building ownership here. We don't own those databases. And so that's where we've had to start from scratch. And it's been a challenge. It's been invigorating. It's been all those things, and trying to find a way to extend our brand to people that have never consumed, lacrosse before, never even heard of lacrosse before. So that's been the challenge, and it's taking time, and I wish it was faster, but it's ultimately a labor of love. Yeah. Is there a possibility of a new arena being built there? I know that I've seen some articles over the years about, efforts, but. Yeah, I mean, I think since the day we walked into the marketplace, we have had that as top of mind, is to find a way to create a situation where there's a new building in San Diego. And I think those talks are ongoing. We've had a number of conversations with a lot of the stakeholders in town. Currently, you know, the operator, the owner of the building is the city, and the operator of the building is ASM, and formerly AEG, for those people that don't know who ASM is yet. But ultimately, you know, we've had a number of conversations, and I think there's initiatives on the table, even up to the, you know, the upcoming election. And there's a number of kind of interested parties. So do I think something's going to get done? Yeah, I do. I think it's going to get done in the not too distant future. But, you know, that in and of itself is some of the challenges, the building or the arena situation here in San Diego.
Yeah. How about on the youth side of things in the area? Do you guys have like a youth program, or do you guys do camps or clinics or anything like that, getting involved in the youth programs?
We do, actually. So there's a couple of initiatives that three initiatives specifically that we'll talk about, but we just signed a big deal with the San Diego Unified School District, and that is an opportunity for us to introduce the sport at a very grassroots level to school-age children that have never seen the sport before. Some of them have, some of them haven't. And I think that initiative alone, and being adopted by San Diego Unified as one of the only sports in San Diego to have that opportunity to interact with San Diego Unified Schools is massive. And so that's a great database builder for us. It's a great opportunity for us to grassroots market and extend our brand to those school-age children and their parents that ultimately we hope will come join us for a game and hopefully fall in love with our product. The second is the current and existing lacrosse community that we're engaging in, to transfer them, not necessarily to have them spend more money in the world of lacrosse, because nobody needs that. Everybody's trying to take a piece. We're trying to extend those kids into the game of indoor lacrosse or box lacrosse, because currently we're kind of the only game in town, if you will. We're the lead purveyor of professional lacrosse in this marketplace from an indoor perspective, and ultimately from an outdoor perspective, because there's no outdoor opportunities in professional lacrosse here in San Diego. So, you know, we're kind of it, and we're trying to transfer those kids from the game of outdoor lacrosse and to learn the indoor game and show the attributes that make it such a great game for growth in both the indoor and outdoor disciplines. But ultimately, the Junior SEALs program for them is really significant. And then the last and the third, among many others, by the way, but those are the three most important. The last initiative I'll talk about is our initiative to grow the game or introduce the game in places that are underserved from a demographic perspective. The challenges over the course of the summer with regards to racial inequality and white privilege and all the things that we're kind of hearing about, you know, the reduction of value in indigenous culture, which our game is based in, by the way. And ultimately, those things caused us, our ownership, and with Joe and myself and our leadership here and the executive team, was to say, you know what? We stand by diversity and racial diversity, and we want to make that statement. But ultimately, what's most important here is not to wear T-shirts and not to, you know, wear signs and logos and those types of things, but it's to put our money where our mouth is and actually grow the game, so that if a young Black player comes into our game, he's not coming in as the only Black player on his team, that he's actually going to stand next to somebody and say, I want to play with that kid because he looks like I do. And too much of what's going on in the lacrosse world today is young Black boys and girls are coming into the sport and they don't embrace it, ultimately don't stay in it, because most of the kids that are playing the sport are white and there's not a lot of diversity. And so ultimately in the city of San Diego, with a massive Hispanic population, a large Black population, we're going into those marketplaces. We're doing free clinics, we're growing the game, and we're going to start growing leagues and teams that participate around recreational leagues in the city of San Diego that are based mainly in those demographics and those markets that are underserved, if you will, in our sport. And so we owe it to our sport, as it comes from the indigenous platform, we owe it to our sport to drive those racial equality issues and put our money where our mouth is, and put ourselves in a situation where we're going to allow, or we're going to drive kids to our game that don't necessarily look like the current demographic that plays it.
And I think that's key. I mean, everybody is going to put out there and say this and that, but you know, actions are what really speak, and that's really what's going to develop change, is, you know, organizations like yourselves that are going to get out there in the community and do something about it. So I commend you guys for that. I think that's a great program.
Well, thank you. We think it's very important. So this is something we're very passionate about, and it's starting now, and have some great relationships with the YMCA and the Armed Services YMCA and Salvation Army and a number of other platforms here in this market in San Diego that are helping us do that. So
how is the upcoming season look with, you know, COVID? Have you guys made any decisions on, you know, when your start is or anything like that? Is it already set?
Yeah, I'd like to tell you it's a moving target, right? And no, we haven't made a lot of decisions. We've had a ton of discussion. I think, you know, a lot of meetings and discussion, and governors and committees, and I sit on a number of them, and it continues to be a challenge. And so the goalposts move every day, as you know, and I think the two things that are significantly causing us concern is one, the jurisdictional issues with regards to opening of indoor buildings, right? And every team in the entire league has a different jurisdiction that they're dealing with, or a different ownership structure for the building. Again, using Denver as an example, they own the building, right? They can decide to open it or close it based on whether, you know, they want to put the protocols in place, but only after the city or state of Colorado, city of Denver and the state of Colorado, or you know, federally, or whatever the case may be, jurisdictionally, the decision is made for them to allow them to be open. Here in San Diego, the building is owned by the city. It's run by AEG or ASM. And the county has jurisdiction over whether this, you know, the state opens. California is a massive state with a lot of people and a lot of urban centers. So they're allowing, I think, the counties to dictate what happens. And so whether we can open with a limited capacity of 25, 50, or 75% it falls kind of squarely at the feet of the county and again, a city-owned building. And then the second, you know, challenge that we're faced with is a number of our players, more than 50% of our players, are based in Canada. And those players crossing the border or attempting to play events in Canada would require a quarantine. And so anytime you cross the border into Canada, you have to quarantine for 14 days. So if these guys come down for a game on a Saturday night as a part-time player, play on a Saturday night, and then go home to try and do their job on Monday morning, right? They have to quarantine. And so their livelihood, not just playing lacrosse, but their livelihood of what they do kind of between the lines, if you will, on Monday to Friday is affected. And so significant issues with the border crossing and significant issues with the jurisdictional openings of the buildings. And so those are the things that we're faced with today that are causing us a significant amount of concern in trying to figure out how we play. And so again, we've contemplated a number of, you know, the bubble scenarios, and making sure that, you know, we're exhausting every opportunity to discuss whether that's the right thing to do without a major television or broadcast media platform. You know, bubble scenarios or isolated no fan scenarios become challenging. And so they become cost restrictive. I mean, again, we talked a lot about how great it is that National Lacrosse League sells, you know, 10,000 plus tickets per game. And that's our lifeblood. That's 90% of our revenue. And so transitioning that from a paradigm shift to a media platform to understand how we can create opportunity in the marketplace, because we know that consumers want to see our product. We know they want to go and watch our product, and they love the in-arena experience. We have to find a way to transfer the game itself outside. Again, maybe we are finding where the circus ends and the game begins, but ultimately finding a way for us to provide a widespread distribution platform for our product is not only paramount now in the concept of no fans or COVID, but it's vitally important for us as we move forward, into the next, kind of decade of what we see here in the 20s for the next 10 years is what are we going to do from a television perspective or a broadcast or a streaming perspective. So again, lots of things discussed. Andrew, sorry I don't have a better answer, but ultimately we're working on it.
No, I mean pretty much everybody's in the same boat, and the Canadian side of things definitely forgot about that. I remember the NBA having some issues there, and I think even Major League Baseball at one point. So, but no, man, it looks like you're doing great things out there. I'm going to make sure that we put the links into the description so people could check out the website and connect with you on LinkedIn. It was really great to chat with you. I appreciate you joining me, and let's keep in touch.
Happy to do it. Excited. Go Seals. And Andrew, thanks. Good luck with the podcast, and we'll talk soon.